I will say this plain, right at the start, so nobody has to wonder. I am a hand tool man. Most days at this bench, it is these two hands, a sharp chisel and a plane, that do the work, and I would not trade that for a room full of motors. But I have been long enough at the bench to know what lasts and what does not, and I will not be too proud to tell you the honest truth. There is one power tool I keep within arm's reach, and I will not work a repair job without it. The oscillating multi-tool. And almost nobody I have ever watched uses it the way it was meant to be used. So let me hand you the tricks, starting with the one that made me set mine down and say to myself, well now, I never knew that. Now I want to be straight with you before we go a step further. If you came here expecting me to tell you this one gadget replaces your saws and your chisels and your planes, I am not going to tell you that, because it is not true. This is a repair and restore tool. It does a short list of jobs that no hand tool does well, and it does them faster than anything I own. Know it for exactly that, and it earns its keep for 30 years. Ask it to be a whole workshop, and it lets you down. That is the plain measure of the thing, and it is worth saying up front. So, the first trick, the one most folks never find, and the one I show anybody who has just bought one and cannot yet see what all the fuss is about. The blade does not have to point straight out from the tool. Look at where the blade bolts on, that little tooth collar at the head, and you will see it is made to let the blade sit at any angle you please. You can turn it 90 degrees so it sticks straight out to the side. You can set it at 45. You can offset it whatever way lets you reach the cut and keep your wrist easy. Most people bolt the blade on pointing dead ahead, the way it came out of the box, and then they spend the rest of their days wrestling the whole body of the tool into cramped corners it was never going to fit. Once you know you can index that blade around, the whole nature of the thing changes. You want to cut flush along a wall where there is no room to swing the body of the tool sideways? Set the blade at 90 degrees and it reaches right along that wall while your hand stays out in comfortable open air. You want to reach down into a tight corner behind a cabinet or up under a toe kick or into the narrow gap between a door jamb and the floor? Cock the blade to the angle that reaches, and the tool body stays where your hand can hold it steady, while only the blade goes into the tight spot. That is the whole genius of the design, and most people never know it is there. One plain note while we are here. Make sure the blade you buy actually fits your tool's collar. The older machines each had their own fitting, and they were not interchangeable. But most everything made now takes a universal star-shaped mount that drops on and locks tight. Check yours before you order a box of blades, because nothing is more aggravating than a blade you cannot use. And when you set the blade at your chosen angle, snug that bolt or that clamping lever down good and firm, because a blade that works loose mid-cut is a blade that chatters, wanders off your line, and can jump in a way you did not plan for. That one thing, that the blade turns to any position, is the whole reason this tool can go where a saw and a chisel simply cannot follow, and it is the very first thing I hand to anybody new to the tool. That brings me straight to the second trick, and this is the one that first earned the tool its permanent place on my bench, the plunge cut. It is the only tool I own that can start a cut in the dead center of a board, or a wall panel, or an old countertop, with no flast, hole drilled first and no edge to start from, and for repair work, that is a small miracle. Say you have got to cut a neat rectangular hole in the middle of a wall panel for an electrical outlet box or a vent register. Or say you need to notch out one rotten section of a floorboard and replace it clean without tearing up the whole floor around it. A handsaw needs an edge to begin at, and you do not have one in the middle of a panel. A drill leaves you only a round hole. But the multi-tool with the blade running lets you start from nothing at all. Here is exactly how you do it. Mark your cut clean with a pencil before you ever pick the tool up. Once you are cutting, you cannot uncut, so the layout matters. Then you tip the tool down onto the wood at a slant, somewhere around 30 to 45 degrees, and you let just the very tip of the blade touch the surface and nibble a shallow starting groove right on your mark. Go slow here. The temptation is to push in fast, but the tip of the blade is doing the hardest work it will do in the whole cut, and you want it biting clean, not skipping across the surface. Once the blade has bitten that starting groove in and found its seat, you slowly ease the tool more upright, letting the blade sink deeper as you rock the angle toward vertical. You are not stabbing straight down all at once. You are rocking it in, a little at a time, and letting it sink at its own pace. When it is cutting full depth, you creep along your line toward the corner of your layout rectangle. Back the blade out of the kerf every little while to shake the dust free and let you see your pencil line clearly. That line is your guide, and you want to be able to read it. Work your four sides, plunging in fresh at each corner if you need to, and the piece drops free. What looked like it would be a wrecking job becomes a tidy one. Here is the repair, I think. About when I explain this. A single rotten floorboard, surrounded by sound ones. You mark the good ends of the bad piece where you mean to cut. You plunge straight down across the board at each mark, nice and controlled, right on your line. Then you run a cut down the length near the middle of the bad piece, so you can lever the two halves out separately without prying against the good boards on either side. What would have been a messy, damaging job, splintering and prying and lifting boards you meant to keep, becomes two clean plunge cuts and the piece comes right out. The new board drops into the gap and you are done. Now let me stop here for a second because I want to say something about the plunge cut that the tool's manual does not tell you. The depth of your cut matters. That blade will cut as deep as it is long if you let it, and in older construction especially, there are wires and pipes running behind walls and under floors that you have no way to see. Know what is behind your cut before you make it. On a wall panel, tap and probe first. On a floor, know your joist layout. And if you are not certain what is hiding there, cut shallow in passes rather than full depth in one go. That extra minute of caution has saved me from something I would not have wanted to find the hard way. The third trick is the one you will reach for the most, and it is where this tool shines brightest above every hand tool I own. The flush cut. This tool will trim a thing off dead level with the surface beside it, and it will do it in seconds when a chisel and a sanding block would take you the better part of an hour. A wooden dowel or a glued plug that dried standing proud of the surface? Lay the blade flat on the wood and shave it flush. A finished nail or a screw poking up where it should not be, too close to the surface to grab with a cutter. A bimetal blade takes it right off, level with the wood. But here is the piece nobody tells you, the piece that separates a clean flush cut from a chewed up mess. You must keep that blade flat and support it against the surface for the whole cut. If you let the tool rock even a little, the blade gouges small dips and scallops into the good wood all around your cut, and those are not easy to fix. Flat and steady, the blade glides across level and leaves the surrounding surface untouched. It helps to support the body of the tool with your steadying hand, not gripping it in mid-air, but resting it lightly on the workpiece or the floor so it cannot tip, and lay a strip of painter's tape down on the finish right beside your cut before you start. It saves the good surface from a stray scuff, and it peels off clean afterward. Here is the old-timer's version of the flush cut, the one that will save you a whole weekend someday. Trimming the bottom of a door casing so a new floor slides up underneath it. If you have ever laid a hardwood or tile floor up to existing trim, you know the problem. Either you notch every board to fit around every piece of molding, which is slow and looks fussy, or you cut the bottoms of the trim pieces up just enough to let the new floor slide underneath, which is clean and fast and looks as if it was always meant to be there. You lay a scrap of your new flooring flat on the ground next to the trim as a spacer, Then you rest the flat of the blade right on top of that scrap and run it along the casing. It cuts every bit of the trim off at exactly the height of your new floor, so the boards tuck underneath clean. That spacer is your depth gauge, and it costs you nothing. I watched a man do this once, a fellow I will call Owen Reel over in Chester County, restoring an old pie safe and relaying the floor of the small room it sat in. He undercut every piece of door casing and baseboard in that room in a single afternoon. Flat blade, steady hand, a scrap of flooring as a spacer. What would have taken 2 days of careful notching was done before supper, and every board ran right underneath clean as a whistle. That is the same move for trimming the bottom of a door that drags on a new thick carpet, and for shaving a proud dowel peg flush on a chair you are mending. One honest word after the flush cut, though. Even with a steady hand, the blade leaves the faintest ridge behind, finer than a whisper. A quick pass with a sanding block or the sanding pad attachment I am about to tell you about brings it down perfectly flat, and no one will ever find where you cut. Now here is where this tool turns from a cutting tool into a restoring tool, and that work is close to my heart. There is a particular satisfaction in it, taking something old and tired and worth the keeping and making it whole again, and this one tool has saved more pieces for me than I could rightly count. You can take the saw blade off entirely and put a stiff, rigid scraper blade on in its place. Now the tool lifts away everything old and stuck, dried up glue that squeezed out of an old joint years ago and went hard as stone. Layers of crackled paint on a piece worth saving. Hardened caulk along a window frame. The black tar-like adhesive that old vinyl floor tiles were set into, the kind that will not let go for anything you throw at it by hand. That fast little buzzing shears it right off the good surface underneath, and it does it without you gouging in with a putty knife, slipping and taking a chip of wood or plaster with it. Keep the scraper blade as sharp as you keep your chisels. A dull scraper rubbing instead of cutting will build heat, and heat on an old finish you are trying to save is the last thing you want. Hold it at a low angle to the surface, barely off flat, and work with a light touch. Let the oscillation do the lifting, not your arm pressure, and watch for that heat. If you feel the surface getting warm under your fingers, back off, let it cool, and go again. Then swap that scraper for the sanding pad, the little triangular pad that takes hook and loop paper. That shape is the whole point of it. It gets you into the sharp inside corners of a frame, into a raised panel, into a recessed molding profile, into places a round orbital sander can never fit. Start with a coarser grit, maybe 80, to take off the old finish and the rough spots. Then work up through 120 and on to 180 to ready it for a fresh coat of oil or paint or whatever finish the piece deserves. So the same tool that made your plunge cut and your flush trim now strips and sands the piece clean and smooth. For anyone who loves bringing an old piece back to life, that combination alone is worth the price of the tool and then some. And there is a whole handful of smaller jobs it does that you will be glad of once you have one within reach. It cuts a rusted bolt or a corroded nail off, flush in a place where a hacksaw could never find room to swing. It notches a slot in a piece of trim for a wire to pass behind without you having to pull the whole run of trim off the wall. It takes the rounded over bottom off an old piece of baseboard so a new section sits in flush against it. It trims a shim poking out from under a door frame without you having to disassemble the frame to do it. It cuts carpet tack strip without ripping up the subfloor around it. Each one of those is a job that used to mean taking something apart, and now it means one clean cut right where it stands, and the blades themselves come in different shapes for different work. A straight plunge cut blade does for most everything. A round or half-moon blade reaches a little farther and makes a longer sweeping cut on flat surfaces. A narrow one gets into a tight slot where nothing wider will fit. Buy a small variety pack to start, and your hands will learn quickly which shape they reach for on which job. It will not take long. The fifth trick is less a trick than the thing that makes all the others work or fail, and it is worth its own time. You must match the blade to what you are cutting, and then you must let the tool do the work instead of forcing it. Here is the honest truth about beginners and this tool. 9 times out of 10, when a man tells me the multi-tool is junk and it will not cut, the tool itself is fine. He has got the wrong blade on it, or a blade so dull it is only rubbing and smoking. A blade filed for clean, dry softwood will stall the moment it meets a hidden nail buried in old framing, and if you keep leaning on it, you will smell it burning, see the smoke curl up, and that blade is finished, ruined in 10 seconds flat on a job it was never made for. I have thrown away a good wood blade that way more than once, forgetting there was an old finish nail buried where I could not see it. So keep a bimetal blade on hand for anything old, anything reclaimed, anywhere a nail or a screw might be hiding, and you will save yourself the blade and the aggravation both. Keep a few kinds on hand. A wood blade for clean, known, nail-free stock. A bimetal blade for anything old or unknown where a fastener might be hiding. And a hard grit or carbon-toothed blade for grutiele and old plaster. Get that right, and you will never burn a blade on a job it was never meant for. Then, and this is the part folks fight, let it work. That blade is only sweeping side to side a couple of degrees, but it is doing it at somewhere near 20,000 oscillations per minute, and that speed is the whole of what cuts. You hold the tool with a light, steady pressure and let the oscillation eat through on its own time. Lean on it hard and you do 3 bad things at once. You slow the blade down so it cuts worse instead of better. You build up heat that scorches the wood and draws the temper right out of a cheap blade so it goes dull in a hurry, and you lose the fine, steady control of your line. Light hand, let it sing, and every little while lift the blade up out of the kerf for a breath of a second to let the dust fall and the blade cool a little. There is a small tip here that will save you from cutting into something behind your work that you meant to keep. Wrap a bit of tape around the blade at the depth you want to stop and cut down only to your tape mark. That tape is your depth line, and it costs you nothing and takes 15 seconds to set. One more honest word on the blades themselves. They are a consumable. They are like a sanding disc or a saw blade. A good one lasts a long while if you treat it right, but no blade cuts forever, and a fresh sharp blade will do in 10 seconds what a worn one struggles at for 2 minutes, scorching and chattering and going nowhere. When it stops cutting easily, when you feel yourself pushing harder and getting less, put a new one on. Do not try to nurse it through another job, and give the tool itself a little care. It is a small air-cooled motor in a plastic housing, and it does not like to run hot for long stretches without a rest. On a long job, set it down for a minute every so often rather than running it right to the edge of its limits, and at the end of the day, blow the dust out of the vents. Fine wood dust packed into a motor is what shortens its life more than anything else. Treat it that way, and it runs faithfully for many years. Now let me say a plain word about when this tool belongs in your hand and when it does not, because knowing when to pick up a tool is half of using it well. If I am at the bench building something new out of clean square stock, this tool stays in its drawer. A saw and a sharp chisel do that work better, quieter, and with more satisfaction. The hand tool is the heart of new work. But the moment the job is a repair, something already built and standing, tucked into a corner or up against a wall or down at the floor where I cannot carry it to the bench, that is when this one comes out. New work, hand tools. Old work, in tight places, the multi-tool. Knowing which is most of the skill of it. I want to say something about why a tool like this matters more the older a shop and a house get, because it comes back to something I say a lot at this bench. Wood is a living thing. It swells and shrinks with the seasons. It moves for as long as it lives, and a great deal of repair work is nothing but tending what the wood has moved. A door that swelled itself tight against the jamb through a wet summer. a plug that pushed itself proud of the surface, a floorboard that lifted and cupped and needs one bad piece taken out clean. This is the tool that meets the wood right where it moved, in the tight, awkward, already built places where you cannot bring the board back to the bench to work it. That is its true gift, not building the new but tending the old. And there is honest work in that as much as in any dovetail I ever cut. I have been at this long enough to know that the men who keep an old house and an old set of furniture going, who fix the loose joint before it becomes a broken piece, who replace one rotten board instead of a whole floor, those men save more wood and more money and more of what their families built than any new construction man ever will. That quiet, careful repair work is its own kind of craftsmanship, and this tool is its most useful helper. Let me give you the whole list one more time, because I want it clear in your head before you put the tool in your hand. The blade turns to any angle, so you can reach into places the body of the tool could never follow. The plunge cut starts in the dead center of a board or a panel with no hole drilled first, perfect for cutting out one rotten piece without touching the sound wood around it. The flush cut trims a plug or a casing or a proud nail dead level with the surface beside it, as long as you keep it flat and do not let it rock. The scraper and sanding pad strip and smooth an old piece clean for a fresh finish, getting into corners no round sander ever reaches. And it rewards the right blade and a light, steady hand, and it punishes the wrong blade and a heavy one. That is the whole of it. Now an honest word on your safety before I let you go, because a tool this handy in tight spaces makes people careless, and careless with a tool is where the trouble starts. Pull the battery or unplug the cord before you ever change a blade, every single time, without exception. Those blades come off stove hot the second after a hard cut, and they are sharper than they look when you are handling them. Wear your eye protection, because this tool throws fine grit right up at your face, and it is loud enough that your ears will thank you for a bit of protection over a long session. When you are cutting old painted trim or plaster, or generating a lot of fine dust from dry wood, put on a simple dust mask. The fine particles hang right there in the air in front of you, and there is no sense breathing them when a simple mask keeps them out. Keep your steadying hand up on the body of the tool, not down near the blade head where the cutting is happening, and clamp your work whenever you can, rather than holding it with your free hand. A light piece of trim can lift or shift when you least expect it, and a clamped piece is a steady piece. Simple habits, all of them. They keep the tool a blessing and not a lesson learned the hard way. One more thing I want to say, and I want to say it honestly the way I would say it to a man standing at the bench next to me. Plenty of plane shops run their tools off an air compressor or a line shaft off a diesel rather than a wall outlet, and the choice of power source is its own conversation. But the tool is the same in any hand, and so is the trick. What matters is the hand holding it and the judgment behind the hand. If you are just getting started with one of these, my plain advice is this: do not try to master all 5 tricks at once. Start with the blade indexing, just that one thing. The next time you have a repair that puts you in a tight corner, stop before you wrestle the tool into the gap and turn the blade to the angle that reaches instead. That one habit will change what you think the tool can do, and the rest will follow naturally from there. I am still finding new uses myself. The more repairs I do, the more tight spots I meet, and more than once this tool has solved a problem I thought was going to take half a day of disassembly. There is a kind of satisfaction in that too, finding the elegant answer in a crooked corner, the solution that does the job and leaves everything around it undisturbed. If this gave you something useful, I would ask a small favor. A like on this video helps it reach the next fellow sitting in his garage, wondering what his multi-tool is actually capable of. That is all it takes. And tell me in the comments, do you keep one of these on your bench? And did you already know the blade turns, or is that new to you today? If you have found a use for it I did not name, I want to hear it, because there is always more to learn at this bench, and I read every comment that comes in. Know your tool. Keep a light hand and let it do the work. Build it once. Build it to last 100 years. I'll see you back at the bench.